I think data is absolutely imperative for any consumer related business. The better you know your consumer, the better is your chance of doing business with that consumer. So I think that's a given. There's no question about that. The issue is what is the kind of data that you can get on your consumer and what is the best way of getting the widest amount of data that the consumer is willing to share with you. Our consumers, we know, are fully engrossed and engaged in the digital world. We are fully aligned with this phenomenon and have been so for the past 7 years, with a bulk of our marketing focus and spends being in the digital space. We go where the consumers go, and the consumers are online.
Welcome to Digiplus Dialogue Season 1. This is a show where we interview the leaders from the brand world. In today's episode, we have with us the India Managing Director of Fossil, one of world's leading consumer fashion accessories brand. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for joining us here today at Digiplus Dialogues. This is the first season of our Digiplus Dialogues, and we are pleased to have you with us. Before we go deep into the conversation, I would like to ask you an icebreaker question. In 2018, while speaking at the sidelines of your 18th store launch in India, you had said, and I quote, an exclusive retail store is the best way to present your brand in its entirety. Now that we are in the age of digital, do you think the digital store has become equally important? And at the same time, has the physical store lost its relevance a little bit?
In the first place, Anirban, thank you very much for inviting us here to speak to you. Appreciate that you've called us on board. And after the 24th physical store that we have put up recently, I'd like to believe that yes, that answer in 2018 actually holds true even today. It is not that we're not fully engaged in the digital space. Our business in the digital space has increased by leaps and bounds. But the reality of the world today and reality of India today is that consumers still want to physically shop. And we are seeing a resurgence, if you please, after COVID of the number of consumers who want to go into our physical stores and get an experience which is very different from the experience, or in some ways quite different from the experience that they get on our online stores. And really speaking, I think it's a question of how consumers shop today. So consumers shop, I think, seamlessly. I don't think consumers actually divide themselves up and say, I will only shop online or offline. It's a digital world, as you rightly said. The consumer has a choice of actually using the various platforms that are available in a manner that suits that consumer the best. So, for example, all of our stores now offer a mobile commerce operation, which essentially means that you can fix an appointment with the store. You can do videos. You can actually have a video call with the store and buy your product online.
Correct.
Have the products explained to you. Have an interview. Have a meeting with the store manager. Get your specific inputs on the products, and then go ahead and buy it offline or online. The m-commerce part of our business is now a significant part of our business. So based on the platforms that we have, we're able to reach our consumers, even to the extent of actually having home delivery of our products, fixing up appointments, getting a catalog level sale. Okay, the consumer says, I'd like to have a catalog of your current products or your new products in this price point. And we're able to actually create a customized catalog for that consumer and then offer it digitally to that consumer. So really speaking, our consumer has the experience and the option of going into whichever channel that suits that consumer the best. Also, not to forget that e-commerce brands are setting up physical stores, so there must be a reason why physical stores still exist.
Yeah, that's a great point. Brands that only existed online now have big offline stores as well. Going in deep into our conversation today, we see a lot of numbers making headlines. For example, 56.4% year-on-year growth or 75 million unit shipments in the calendar year till September. When it comes to the smart wearable categories, one of the biggest ones. How do you read these numbers as the India boss of one of world's leading consumer fashion accessories player?
It's actually quite impressive that a category that hasn't really been in the business for so long has made such amazing strides. For us, it's very clear that the consumers have a felt need for a functional product that can do so many things that a traditional watch cannot. And I think to that extent, we truly believe that there is a large market for a purely functional device. So I expect that the lower end of the market will continue to grow for some time. But having said that, I think for all the products that we have had, particularly tech-related products, there is actually an evolution in that product. From the time where it's meant for a very select audience, price points are relatively high, and then the product gets a lot more democratic because technology costs actually drop over time. Accessibility becomes much easier. There is a wider spread and knowledge of what the product can do for you. But it also means that there is, after a while, an evolution of that consumer, and that consumer then reaches up to find a product that fits up not only the functional aspect of the business, but also takes that consumer into a lifestyle area. Now, we've been, from the day that we've launched our product, talked about ourselves as a fashion plus tech play. So I think we understand the DNA of our brands and understand that we are in the fashion business. And while consumers do need a functional product, but I think for our consumers, fashion is a very important part of their lifestyle, as it were. And we believe there is a market for all of this. In a way, we are very happy that the market expands because the onus of creating this market, is now divided and shared across a lot of players in the market. So the category will expand. And in that category, as the category evolves and as consumers evolve in their lifestyle choices, they are going to find a place for the combination of fashion and tech, which is all what Fossil is about.
Great, great,
Uh, and not to
MS.
forget that the largest player in the world today in this category is actually at the highest price point. So really speaking, we think there is a wide gamut of prices that will actually appeal to consumers.
Correct. But as the numbers grew, Mr. Johnson, what we also saw is that the average selling price dropping, and that's because there's a lot of action in the bottom of the pyramid as well. But as top of the pyramid brand, how do you see that drop of average selling price, and does that something bother you? Is this an encouragement for you to say these people at the bottom will certainly graduate to your customer cohort?
I think pretty much that is true for all products, as it were. There is a price pyramid, and if you want to play at the highest end of the pyramid, bar exceptions that we see here, the fact of the matter is that the size of the pyramid is a little lower. Now, you might have the technology advantage that gets you to start that pyramid, in which case the pyramid's yours. But after a while, as consumers keep adding on and as products keep adding on at the lower end of the price pyramid, you're going to find that there is a large market growing, even bigger than the market before. A much smaller pyramid has become a much bigger pyramid, and there is a place to play. So to that extent, yes, the average ASPs have dropped. We acknowledge that. We see that in the marketplace, but that doesn't mean that the market is not growing. The
Okay.
market is growing, and we see our products doing even better year on year, every year as compared to the past.
Mhm. Okay. And what is the role that digital marketing is actually playing, in your expansion of the customer acquisition? And also, is this luxury shopping a seasonal approach? Is this I buy it before the wedding season or before the festive season or is the gifting season?
Let me try to split that into the two separate areas that you took up. Let me address the first area first, which is,
Yeah,
what is the role that digital marketing actually plays for our consumers?
correct.
So I think it goes back to the consumer. Who's our consumer and what does that consumer do? Our consumers are largely in the age group of 18 to 35. They are
Okay.
extremely digitally savvy. They're fully engaged in the digital world. As you know, India is in India, we have the largest consumers of social media, as it were, the largest consumers of bandwidth in the digital space. So our consumers, we know, are fully engrossed and engaged in the digital world. Uh, we are fully aligned with this phenomenon and have been so for the past 7 years, with a bulk of our marketing focus and spends being in the digital space. We go where the consumers go, and the consumers are online. So our entire effort in terms of building up a new consumers as well as connecting with our existing consumers, both of that has been through the digital space, and we've been doing that not just for the last 1 or 2 years, but for the course of the last 7 years, and that's where the consumers are. So for us, I think it's a natural corollary to everything that we're doing. We go where our consumers go, and we would like to be in touch with them where they are.
Correct. Great. Talking about digital, I have become a fan of your brand, and that has happened. Most of it has happened through my digital purchase, decisions that I have made. Be it watch, be it sunglasses. I most of it I bought online. What are the chances of you knowing me, and that I purchase your product? What are your chances of targeting me at a period when I am most likely to buy that product?
Well, it's a very large consumer space and a very large media space. So if marketing works very perfectly in a perfect world, then we would only target you at the exact point of purchase where you want to make up your mind. We're still getting there. But the reality is that we do communicate largely in the digital space, or as close to the consumer's point of purchase as possible. So when we get into the physical world, for example, we
Mhm.
are at as close to the point of sale as possible. So we are at the malls, we are at the counters, we are in department stores where where the consumer is practically shopping, and right in front of that consumer is where we have an expression, or we are in the digital space, and bulk of our efforts are in the digital space. So obviously, all of our search and display campaigns are oriented towards making sure search campaigns oriented towards as close to the consumer when the consumer is actually making this journey as it stands, either in terms of getting on board or at the point of the last part of the game when they're actually adding to cart. So our focus is to make sure that the consumer is contacted as close to the point of purchase as possible. But of course, there is a market of young growing consumers, and I told you we are in the age group largely of 18 to 35. So our reach to new consumers may not be so. In terms of our brand
Yeah.
building exercise, our awareness campaigns, they are targeted at whatever is the best cohort that we can find of other brands or other products that are closely aligned to our brand. So that's what we are looking at.
Mhm.
I didn't answer part of your earlier question with regard to the part of luxury shopping, or
Yeah, the seasonal approach.
seasonal approach of our consumers. Uh, so I think we look at our product in at two phases: during self purchase and during purchase for others. It's basically a gifting purchase.
Mhm.
I think the self-purchase part of our business actually comes from consumers who want to buy it for an occasion, and that occasion could be any time across the year. So a lot of our products are bought towards self-purchase, which means that I don't think there's a seasonality there. The seasons, any season that you want to shop in, you have a reason to buy, and people tend to buy. And I have a curious input here. One of the offerings that we have in our store, our retail stores, is the fact that you can engrave a message on the back of your watch.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, well over 85% of our watches are engraved, which means
Oh,
consumers find a reason to put something down there, some
correct.
message at the back of their mind. So there is a reason that they are buying. The gifting part of our business is growing to be a bigger and bigger part of our business. And that has uh, a year-round reason because there's no specific reason, but it also has seasonality. So things like Diwali season, for example, or a wedding season, that has a seasonality impact. But having said that, the deltas are much smaller. We don't see huge changes that happen during seasonal elements. But yes, having said that, there is a seasonal element. Diwali is an important seasonal element. The marriage season is an important gifting element. So to that extent, there is some variation out there.
Great. So one thing I would like to know from you, I mean, we talk so much about smartwatch, and I know it's a segment that has, suddenly become very high as well as it's selling. But what is happening to the other segments of watches, like analog watches, for example? Are people still wearing those, and buying those? So what do you see happening to that analog watch or non-smart product portfolio that you have today, which is also very vast?
Let me answer that with one statement.
Mhm.
This has been the best year for us in Fossil India for our traditional analog watches.
Wow.
It's been our highest growth year for traditional watches in absolute numbers. The reason for that, I think, is very clear, is that our consumers are not segmented and will only subscribe to one kind of a watch. Finally, at the end of the day, the product is something which is a lifestyle product. A watch is a lifestyle product, expresses a certain lifestyle set of values that our consumers have. And I think our consumers have a much wider spectrum than a purely functional device, as it were. So to that extent, analog watches are here to stay.
Mhm.
It's been a great year, and our expectation going forward is that while the smartwatch part of the business will expand,
Mhm.
and the market's getting even bigger, but traditional watches are no way behind. We are surging ahead on that front, and as I mentioned, it's been a great year for us in 2022 with regard to our traditional watches.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Apart from watches, you also have a great portfolio of accessories. Uh, how do you see the current mix today? And among all the product offerings that you have, where do you see the biggest opportunity of growth?
Of course, we see phenomenal opportunity in our traditional business, which is our traditional watch business. We see phenomenal great opportunity in the smartwatch part of the game. We've already spoken about that. But there are two categories that I want to flag off going forward. I'd like to flag off in the accessory space. I'd like to flag off our approach towards leather. It is a growing part of our business. We have men's and women's leather products, both in the form of bags as well as in the form of small leather goods like belts, wallets, etc. We are expecting a phenomenal increase in this segment of our product because as the product gets resonates even more with our consumers, as consumers have used watches as the methodology of getting exposed to the brand. I think they're ready for the next journey, and the next journey will come in the area of two categories that we have: leather products that we spoke about, and the second category that I want to speak about is jewelry. There is this huge white space that exists between what is seen as fashion jewelry at the lower end of the spectrum, and then there is precious jewelry, which is now so far away
Mhm.
from the fashion part of the business that there is a huge white vacuum thanks to the price of gold, thanks to the price of precious material. There is a huge spread out there, and that white space is getting even wider as we speak day by day, given the price of gold. This is an area that Fossil and its portfolio of brands have got product offerings across the world, and this is something that we're going to be focusing on in the years to come. An area that I think the consumers are ready to now buy into. So you're going to see a lot more with regard to Fossil jewelry, both men's and women's. We're talking in terms of Emporio Armani jewelry. We're talking in terms of Michael Kors jewelry. We're talking in terms of Skagen jewelry. So all of these are categories that you're going to see as we go forward.
Correct. And one more thing, sir, I want to know from you. How big a role does e-commerce play? Because I talked about my purchase decisions, and most of them were probably on e-commerce platforms, and a lot of that data rests with them, and you don't get access to that data. So, how important is it also for you to have people migrate to your digital store?
I think data is absolutely imperative for any consumer related business. The better you know your consumer, the better is your chance of doing business with that consumer. So I think that's a given. There's no question about that. The issue is what is the kind of data that you can get on your consumer, and what is the best way of getting the widest amount of data that the consumer is willing to share with you. So to that extent, I think the brand.com stores that we have allow us to access the consumers directly, and the consumer then provides us a level of data that the consumer is willing to share with us. So this data is going to be absolutely critical in our journey forward. The consumer is willing to share data to a certain level with us, and we are very happy because that data allows us to go back to the consumers in a meaningful manner, go back to the consumers with products and suggestions that are relevant for that consumer. So actually now we are pretty much going to a world of one, if I may say so,
Okay,
where every consumer has an individual voice. And if you have the ability to reach that consumer in as much individuality as possible, you have the best form of connecting with that consumer.
great, great, fantastic. We move on to our next segment, which is called stoppage time. Then here we say that we won't give you much time to answer these questions. So, to start with, how will you sum up 2022 as the MD of Fossil India? What it brought for the brand.
It's been a fantastic year. Hopefully, we are done and dusted with with COVID and its impact on our businesses. So I think it's going to be one of our. It is the bestest year that we've had till today.
Wow, great. List two things that you're eagerly waiting to happen in 2023 in your area of interest.
I did speak about two categories that we are going to be working very hard with. That's jewelry and leather, and both of these are going to be high interest categories for us for the coming year.
Great. Will first-party data become the big differentiating factor and serve as a competitive advantage?
Absolutely. We spoke about the world of one. Every
Mm.
consumer has a voice, and if you can understand that consumer, you have the best chance of building up a relationship with that consumer.
Has digital managed to bridge the gap between Bharat and India for premium brands like Fossil?
I'm not absolutely certain how you are going to define Bharat in India, but I'm assuming that if you're looking at an urban and rural divide, then
Yeah.
I think there is no divide, frankly, in my mind. There is a purchasing power, and that purchasing power actually extends across Bharat and India, if I say so. Our products sell as well in smaller stores. In fact, the growth level in the in tier 2 and tier 3 cities is much higher than the growth in tier 1. So yes, I don't think there is a gap.
Are you looking at the digital footprints of people? For example, Kirti Senon and Varun Dhawan are your two ambassadors that each time I see when I go into your website. But are you now focusing on how big they are on digital, how big an influencer they are before you go and make them your ambassador?
It's very definitely an important criteria that we use, because that's the best way to measure the connect that the celebrity has with his or her audience, and those are real numbers, and we can see that translating into an impact for the brand. So yes, it's an important parameter that we use.
Great. The last one, you have watches, bags, wallets, jewelry. Which is it that brings you a smile in terms of category, and which one you think can do much better?
The beauty of the India market is that it's really growing exponentially as we speak. So what really brings a smile, I don't think we have a frown on any of them. What really brings a smile is that the opportunity is very, very large in India. We have an age dividend factor. We have a growth factor. The GDP is growing. Disposable incomes are increasing. I think we're extremely bullish about what India means for the fossil world, as if I may say so. So yes, opportunity is what brings a smile to our face.
Great. Thank you. Just last couple of questions, in the segment that we call the conclusion. There's so much conversation around digitalization of India, the boom of e-commerce as well. What is the biggest digital challenge according to you today that exists?
I guess there are 2 or 3 different challenges that we have in the digital world. Companies that have been in business for a while, a big challenge for them would be to make sure that there is an integration between all of their different technology platforms that they have. It's all very well for a brand new company, a startup company, to say, hey, we have a seamless set of platforms available, all platforms that speak across the line, platforms that speak to each other. So I think any company that's been in business, and we've been in business for a while, it's the challenge of getting all of that technology talking to the consumer in a seamless fashion. So that's one element. 2, I spoke in terms of data, making sure that you get as accurate data as possible. So the world of one, where you're able to get as much data as you can about individual consumers, and then you're able to address that consumer specific needs. Now, while it sounds fairly logical, but I think there's a lot of hard work that goes behind the scenes to make this happen. In terms of communication, I think there are so many platforms that are relevant to consumers today, as our consumers are largely on the digital platform. And to that extent, there is so many opportunities to speak to the consumer. You need to speak to the consumer, however, in a manner that is best aligned to the consumer's time and resources, and at the level of input that the consumer is interested in. So I think there's a lot of choice out there, and the question for us is to find the right mode of reaching the consumer at the right time. So I think that's the last challenge I would talk about.
This is a show for the future leaders from the headline makers of today. What are your 2 suggestions that you would like to leave for brands trying to leverage digital for customer acquisition and retention?
I'm probably going to go back in time and say the first focus needs to be the consumer. It doesn't matter which is the roadmap that you use to get to the consumer, whether it's online, offline, combination thereof. But finally, it's the consumer that is at the center of all of your decisions. You can't go very much wrong if that's the focus that you've had. So I think the big challenge here is not to get enamored of technology for the sake of technology, because there is such a lot of wonderful work that is happening. The idea is to get enamored with your consumers. And if you can understand your consumer the best, well, that's the road to success. We're all on that road to success. So let's hope for the best.
Great. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Anirban. My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.